Welcome to Sid Caudle, Christian People's Alliance. Sid, we're going to go deep today. We usually go deep. We're going to go deeper and get into economics. And a recent report is absolutely astounding and it's independent. And we've got to sit up and take notice. But before we do that, let's get even more domestic and go into the housing problems at the moment. There never has been any chance to complete what Starmer and co said. And now Angela is taking over. And it's not going to be any better, is it?
Well, housing is not a simple, straightforward matter. I mean, they're trying to pretend that, oh, what we need to do is just build more houses. If we build more houses, everything will be fine. Actually, the first thing we need to address is who is requiring all these new houses. And Reform have really, well, what Reform have said is that they're going to make sure that all new houses only go to British-born people. Now, that's a problem, really, because once you say British born, there's many people that are British citizens that aren't necessarily born in the UK. So if you're saying British born, not just British citizens, then you're saying something really quite different. I think that's a bad definition, frankly. I mean, if they say British born and British citizens, then that will be okay. But we do have to address the simple fact that there are enormous people coming over here that are making a deliberate attempt to make Britain and the West more Islamic. It's not by accident, it's a deliberate process that's going on. And what we're doing in this country is not only welcoming it, but also giving those people social housing. And that's ridiculous. Frankly, it's just utterly mad. And the first thing we need to do is to close the borders, which can be done and which Trump has done in America. And the Conservatives are actually saying that if we close the borders and only give social housing to people who are British citizens, then we can actually save, they've said 228,000 per year would be removed from the housing register. And that's an enormous number of houses that are no longer required. I mean, and that, frankly, is the first thing we need to do. We need to close the borders and to remove and basically say that people that are foreign nationals are not entitled to social housing in this country. And once we do that, suddenly the requirement for new housing goes down enormously. Now, the other thing which I want to say is this. They are saying that in the 1950s, we were building 200,000 social units per year. But we have to remember that those 200,000 were basically being built because of slum clearance. So basically, houses that were slums were being knocked down and new houses were being built. But the new houses being built were often high-rise flats that actually most of those houses built in the 1950s are no longer there because they were basically creating new slums. So they were very low quality housing. So we can't only look at the quantity, we also have to look at the quality of what we're building. Are we building houses that will last 100 years? Because that has to be the absolute minimum, frankly. And by and large, we are. And the actual number of houses we built last year was 203,000. Now we say, well, that's not enough. But a lot of them, only 12,000 of those 203,000 were actually council houses. No, they don't have to be council houses. Actually, quite frankly, most people don't want to live in council housing. So if all we're doing is addressing the number of council houses, we're looking at the wrong thing. And also, what Angela Rayner has done with her Social Housing Act is to destroy the private rented sector. Now, that's a massive issue. Once you destroy the private rented sector and say in its place we've got to put social housing and anyone that can't afford to buy their own house has got to be put in a social housing, then frankly, you're not addressing the issue in the right way at all. And that's also a massive issue for this government.
A lot of people will agree with you, Sid. I certainly do. It's the old problem, isn't it? Socialism thinks it knows best. and you will conform. Whereas the free market doesn't always get it right. But in the end, it does because A, it's free, freedom, and also it relies on what people really want and need, not what the government dictates.
Well, exactly. But you see, destroying the private rented sector is just so short-sighted. If people don't understand, what Angela Rayner has done is basically said that no tenancy can be terminated unless the tenant has either trashed the property or they're not paying the rent. And the only exception to that is if the landlord wants to sell the property. But even if they want to sell the property, there is new restrictions that if you put the property on the market, you're then not allowed to relet it. So, and it's also if you say, well, I want to put the house property on the market, and I'm terminating the tenancy, even under those circumstances, it's very difficult to actually say to the tenant, you need to leave the property. It's now almost impossible. It's extremely difficult now to remove a tenant from the property if you want to sell, if you want to, if you need to. And that's this new law that's been passed. And in addition to now having a minimum of 4 months' notice, so that's also a new requirement, 4 months' notice. So she's made it very difficult for private landlords to operate at all.
It is horrendous when you look at the boroughs of London and boroughs like Brent, the famous one, of course. There are 5 others exactly the same, in that half the people in council houses are foreign born. I mean, that is only there for one purpose, and that's to keep the Socialist Party in that particular borough because that's where the votes come from, Sid.
Well, yes, that's absolutely. And see, this is a major problem for the Labour Party because the Labour Party doesn't want to recognise what's going on. They want to pretend that all these people coming over in small boats and all these people that are coming over and overstaying their visas and goodness knows what, and therefore applying for permanent leave, for indefinite leave to remain, that all these people are desperate and need help, and we should be extending the right hand of fellowship to these people and saying you're welcome to our country. Now that's what they want to pretend. But if they understand the reality of which is they're deliberately coming over in order to make the UK more Islamic, if they understood that, then their policies would be different. But absolutely, you're right. They want the votes of Muslims and they want the votes of all these people that are coming over. They want to give them indefinite leave to remain. They want to give them the vote, and they believe that will help them electorally. And it's quite honestly, they are acting against the interests of the majority of people in this country.
Okay, we're going to go on to economics. Don't turn off the TV set, folks. But it's a report, an independent report that speaks volumes for where we are, and it's got to be addressed. Now, it's partly technical, and that part I will paraphrase. Other parts are straightforward, and I'll just read them. The first one, Sid, I want your comments on each one, if you would. European Union countries have established welfare states that are steadily and have been indeed expanding from the 1980s, and it is stifling economic growth.
Well, I'm not against the welfare state, frankly, because I think the welfare state is a good thing for people that need it. The issue is not whether we have a welfare state, the issue is how it operates. Now, people have to understand, of course, that when you've got no welfare state, then everyone's reliant on charity, and Christian charities are expected to do an awful lot, helping the poorest and whatever. With a welfare state, it does make an enormous difference to those who really genuinely need help. But at the moment, the welfare state is being abused, as we've said, by people that are deliberately coming to the West. It's not just Britain, it's also the whole of Europe, deliberately coming over in order to make all those countries in Europe more Islamic. Now, if you say to those people, yeah, you can be part of our welfare state, you can get benefits, you can get help, we'll give you help with housing, whatever, then of course it's going to impose an enormous burden on the economies of the whole of Europe. And yeah, there's going to be a lot less economic growth as a result of basically instead of focusing on creating wealth, you're focusing on distributing the wealth and you're struggling to distribute it. So you're having to increase taxes enormously. And when you increase taxes, then you impose a massive additional burden on business. That's happening across Europe, and that's certainly happening in the UK.
It is indeed. Next one, the European Union has also profligated stifling regulations that place a heavy encumbrance on businesses. It goes on for various things, quoting gas and electricity prices, the dreaded renewable energy. And at the end, it says now 3 to 5 times higher is the energy we need than in the US, and electricity prices that are 2 to 4 times higher than in the US. Finally, to survive, many European companies have actually reallocated outside of Europe.
Yes. So, obviously, as far as we're concerned, this whole move to net zero is a hoax because, they started off the environment movement with, we're going to have global cooling and there's going to be an ice age by the year 2000. They were saying that in the 1970s. And then it was only in 1987 that they switched from global cooling to global warming. But the evidence that what we're experiencing this year with increased temperatures is a result of man-made climate change is just, there's no evidence for it whatsoever. And this massive drive towards electric cars, I mean, they're saying all new petrol cars have got to be phased out by the year 2030. I mean, it's nonsense, frankly. All this drive to get rid of gas boilers in people's homes, I mean, it's nonsense. I mean, and not producing oil from the North Sea. They reckon we're going to lose 100,000 jobs by getting rid of all oil from the North Sea over time. And we're just going to import it all. I mean, it's just complete nonsense economic policy. And what you're saying about regulation is absolutely spot on. See, our policy is to freeze all regulations for 5 years, literally every regulation. The only way you'd allow any new regulation is literally if you've got a new industry or something like artificial intelligence, for instance, which you say, well, we didn't have that 5 years ago. We've now got artificial intelligence and we need to regulate it. That may be necessary. But if you haven't got a new product or a new industry, then all regulations should be frozen. And if you do that, you immediately save phenomenal amounts of money because enormous number of regulators are employed to introduce new regulations. And most of the new regulations they introduce are completely unnecessary, frankly. I mean, this government, the UK government, has decided it wants to regulate football. Football's never been regulated before. Why on earth do we need to regulate football, for crying out loud? The only reason they want to regulate football is to encourage more homosexual football players because we don't have any homosexuals playing football at the moment in the 4 major leagues in the UK. It's like, oh, this is terrible. So we've got to regulate it to encourage more homosexual footballers. Well, frankly, the whole thing is utter nonsense. And they're doing this throughout Europe. And a lot of our regulations are only being introduced because we want to follow Europe. And it's nonsense. The whole regulatory system has gone far, far too far.
Don't have a problem with the women's game, do they? There's plenty of gay, inverted commas, players there. We move on before we get diverted. International investment is turning away from Europe. 9 out of 10 of the top tech world companies are American and are in America. The 10th is in Taiwan. Says it all, Sid.
Yeah, this is frankly a sad reality, but I mean, it's a credit, frankly, to the whole country of the United States, the fact that they were able to produce companies like Facebook and Amazon and Google and Microsoft and all these companies that really were born from nothing over the last 30 years and are now absolutely massive multinationals. It's a credit to the American system that they were able to produce these companies. And although we might say, well, why are they American? I mean, the result of the socialists, the reaction of the socialists is, oh, we got to somehow tax them and destroy them. But no, I mean, it's great that they're there. It's great that they've risen up. Yes, we should tax them fairly, but not overtax them.
Yeah, a bit of an oddball, this one, but I understand it completely. Although heat waves had been affecting Europe for more than 2 decades, to a larger or lesser extent, the continent remains resistant to air conditioning. Europe killed more than 20,000 people in 2003. That was a heat wave year. This year, it's expected to kill 25,000 people. Now, I'll underline that by just looking across the pond to America, in that as soon as air conditioning was invented, quite a few decades ago, wow, half the country, the whole of the southern part of the country was revolutionized. They didn't have to sit on their porches for 6 months in a rocking chair because it was too hot to do anything, which was happening. Air conditioning came, and you've got fabulous cities like Dallas, etc. And it's the economic center in many instances of the whole of America. Now, it's a simple thing, Sid. Is it viable?
Well, of course it is. I mean, I've been to Miami. I've experienced it in Florida. And absolutely, the majority of people there go from an air conditioning home to an air conditioning office or an air conditioning shopping mall, and they travel in an air conditioned car. Everything is air conditioned, and they don't actually spend the majority of people in Florida don't spend a lot of time sitting out in the sun. But if you didn't have air conditioning, I mean, life would be absolutely insufferable. And like you say, the result of that is it's almost incredibly difficult to work. So of course air conditioning makes sense. And in any country in Europe, which is a hot climate, it makes sense to have air conditioning. The move not to have air conditioning because of the extra electricity cost is utter nonsense, frankly.
Yeah, it is a bit of a con, let's say the truth, in Britain. The purchasing of an air conditioning unit here in Spain, we regularly get in the 40s where we live because we're in the Sierras and we don't get the cool breezes of the coast. And 40 degrees, you can't work effectively.
Mm.
So we need air conditioning, and we can get a big air conditioner for a large room for about £400 installed. Now in
Mm.
Britain, multiply that by 3.
Yes.
It's ridiculous price. That needs to be addressed.
Yes, but I mean, the government are actually trying to stop air conditioning. They want to prevent people from being able to have it. It's just crazy. I mean, I'm not saying in the UK everyone needs air conditioning, but certainly in offices where people need to work,
Mm.
if it's a hot day, there should be air conditioning in an office that makes it easy to work, not a situation where it's like, oh, we can't work today because it's too hot. I mean, you just can't have that. I'm sorry.
Bit of a promo for you, Sid. Starting next week, we have got the definitive truth about climate change. We'll christen it that. And we've got a series of 10 programs. They're only 5 minutes each in length, but they say it all. And folks, you have not been given the truth. We will give you the truth about this net zero nonsense and what is really happening, because it's so important. The next item they've covered is pessimism about the future, fueled by the questionable narrative, man-made global warming, and the hyped-up fear that the planet may be soon uninhabitable. It's on the rise in Europe. It's not just Britain.
Well, yes, I mean, so, we've been calling it now for quite a while, the climate hoax. And what really changed me was reading Rodney Howard-Brown's book, The Killing of the Planet, because, you realize that actually carbon is good for the environment. And this whole idea of got to reduce carbon emissions is actually nonsense, frankly. And they've had scientists have photographed the Earth, at various different times, and the Earth is now much greener than it was 20 or 30 years ago, across the board. So this idea that somehow, we've got to get rid of carbon. I mean, we don't need to get rid of carbon. It's just nonsense. And as I've said many times, the drive behind the whole climate agenda is the need for a one world government. Because obviously, if it was a problem, if we did need to reduce carbon emissions, and carbon emissions were basically poisoning the world, if that was true, then one country can't solve the problem. All the countries of the world together have got to come together to solve the problem. But they've created something which is untrue to create the need for a one world government, which is just a complete hoax.
I'll really conflate the following because it needs doing, but the proportion of Muslims in the United Kingdom, France, Belgium, Netherlands, and Sweden have been increasing decade after decade with the consequences. And one of them is that political parties, the main political parties, are really on a downer against the new populist parties that are coming along and saying we have an alternative. This is significant because it goes on to say the elites, the Europe elites, will literally do anything to get rid of these emergent parties. Now, yeah, we often say that Farage has got a target on his back. Yes, he has. He's not the only one. Germany have got the same situation, and France. If anybody right of centre, and they are not far right of centre, yes, is absolutely demonized instantly.
Well, yes, you see, to me, the issue is violence. And if any political party starts engaging in violence to promote their agenda, then that is unacceptable, and then that will be considered to be a far right party. But any party that involves peaceful democratic means to put forward their policies and their proposals, as indeed Reform UK does in this country, then they cannot and should not be called far right, because they are simply peacefully putting forward alternative policies. And it's absolutely right that there is a need for alternative policies when the major parties, or the major party that's now running the UK and the major party that's running Spain and running many countries in Europe, is actually supporting what is the Muslim Hijra, deliberately traveling to Europe to make the West more Islamic. Now, I'm saying this because Mamdani, in his the mayor of New York, said it openly. These people are on a journey. That they are traveling in order to promote their religion. And he said it point blank. And in fact, it was only when he said it point blank that I thought, okay, so now we've got the clear evidence that this is true. We're not just making allegations, it's they themselves have said this is what we're doing. So if they say this is what we're doing, we need to listen to them and make notice of what they're doing. And it's understandable that throughout Europe, the majority of people say, we don't want this. We don't want to be colonized and made Islamic. It's actually the Islamic religion is not a particularly pleasant religion, particularly for women. But, it's not anyone that leaves their Islamic religion is put to death under Sharia law. And some people say, oh, we need to have Sharia law in the UK. We don't, Sharia law will be a total disaster in the UK. So, we've got to speak out against this and we have to campaign against it.
Time has moved on too quickly, as usual, Sid. We've got to fit the sports in. And cricket, Bryden Carse, handcuffed by the police in a nightclub, and it keeps happening. And in the background, you can see clearly Ben Stokes. Now, this is interesting because the culture of cricket, and some say rugby union as well, but especially cricket, has descended. And the Australians are loving it. They see what happens. They are laughing at English cricket. And we've got no resilience. We've got no rules. We've got Bazball. Well, we haven't now, but we've still got Bazball mentality. Go for it, guys. Enjoy yourself. You don't live that long. And it happens again and again, Sid. It's a deep problem, isn't it?
Well, there is a lot more money coming into cricket now than there was in the past, partly because of the 20 over game and also the 100 game, I guess. It's bringing more money into the game. And as the players start earning a lot more money, they tend to be a bit more reckless. And it's not unusual to see footballers in nightclubs all the time. It's people have got to be able to learn to behave and to behave correctly, especially when they're international players and they're representing the country. And Stokes hasn't behaved particularly well, although I've enjoyed watching his cricket. But yeah, absolutely, it's absolutely right that the authorities should clamp down on anyone that's representing the country that misbehaves in any way, shape, or form.
Well, they're held up there to be our heroes, aren't they? And we must follow what they do. They're not setting a very good example. Of course, we've mentioned this previously. The bizarre incidents of in the middle of a test match. Ben Stokes takes photographs, videos on his phone, and then walks out and says, "I'm leaving," in the middle of an innings. That sums it up again, Sid.
Well, yes, I mean, he's not a particularly responsible individually, unfortunately, and sometimes you could enjoy people's cricket without necessarily respecting their behaviour off the set. But it is unfortunate. I mean, and it's right that his time as an England cricketer has come to an end, given his behaviour. But I don't feel resentful towards it. But I think hopefully young cricketers will learn that this is the way not to behave.
Yeah, which moves us finally onto footy and beginning of a new season. Don't be perturbed if you're one of the teams that bit the dust already. Game one is not necessarily indicative of what's going to happen, but I think it is with Manchester United. There's a real problem. And dear old Eric Cantona wrote a big column which was in total agreement with my rant after Saturday's game against Hull. It's the same old, same old. And the one thing that has got to be done, if you are a world-class top club, whether you like it or not, followers of other teams, Man U is, you've got to get the best players. And if you get a management situation that may be very good and frugal, but you can't be that frugal. If you're buying middle of the road players, Sid, you get middle of the road results. If you reach the status of a super club, you've got to pay. Highly illustrated that 3 years ago they could have bought Harry Kane. Look what would have happened then. You've got to spend money if you're going to retain your position. Oh, but for goodness sake, look how well he did last year. That our new famous manager, who I approve of, I've got to say, Carrick. But people forget United played very few matches last year. They were fresh. They were playing against tired legs. That's how they got the good results. Illustrated last Saturday. Am I being too harsh, Sid?
Well, I think you were right when you said that we can't make too many judgments based just on the first game. And you also have to remember that they were playing a promoted club that, frankly, is going to put absolutely everything into that game. And the truth is that Hull wanted to win that game much more than Manchester United wanted to win that game. And, there wasn't enough passion there, there wasn't enough desire there. And we can't judge the quality of the players quite yet. What really matters with the first game, frankly, is how the team plays, not necessarily the result. And it's you've got to say, what do we need to do to change this? I mean, I support Reading, as you know, and in their phenomenal season in 2005-06, when they actually broke the record and got 106 points in the championship and got promoted to the Premiership, they actually lost their first game. And yes, in the end of the season, they broke the record of the number of points scored, which still hasn't been broken by anybody else since. So yeah, we can't judge too much on the first game, but Manchester United have certainly got to learn from it and pick up and show that passion and desire to win, which has got to be equal any club, frankly. But well done Hull for winning their first game. But the Hull can't just think because we won our first game, we're now fine. We're a Premiership club. We can compete with everybody. And they've got to continue to show that same passion and desire every game they play.
Well, we've got to go and think about the real sports news, of course, and that is that Haaland has had his haircut. That is the real. I wonder if it'd be like Samson and he'll lose all his footballing ability.
I doubt it. Haaland's a great player, but there's a concern for Manchester City that they've also lost a lot of supportive players. So we'll have to see, how they go. They've also obviously got a different manager. There's no guarantee that Manchester City are going to continue at the top. I think Arsenal will continue at the top. I think they've continued. They've recruited very well. They've got a great team.
There you go. Sid, thank you so much. See you again shortly.
Yeah.